Hey there, career seekers. Welcome to Find Your Passion Career. I'm here to help you find a career you like, and dare I say, possibly even love. I'm your host, Amanda Nachman. I'm the founder and CEO of College Magazine. After working with thousands of college students, I've noticed that when it comes to career, there's a lot to demystify. Let's get started. You are qualified. My book, Qualified, helps you uncover your strengths and all the unique value you have to offer. Learn how to level up your story, make courageous connections, and speak with confidence to achieve your dream career. Get your copy and join the Qualified Challenge at amandanachman.com. Hi, everyone. Today I have with me Veronica Gerosimo, currently serving as the Assistant Dean of Student Life and Leadership at Hudson County Community College in New Jersey. An involved student leader turned student affairs professional, Veronica is passionate about cultivating student leaders, providing an encouraging and supportive student life, and leading by example to ensure her diverse student population feels a sense of belonging and inclusion. A self-proclaimed workaholic and panda lover, when Veronica is not on her laptop, her favorite thing to do is visit Walt Disney World with her wife. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like, when you get the bio, the highlight reel, that you had this like perfectly seamless transition from college to career. Did you always know what you wanted to do? Was it just like that?
Not at all. As you said that, I was like, I guess it does sound like that, but that is not at all what it was like.
We like to package it with a bow, right? We like to make it sound all neat and like perfect at the end.
Exactly. Like the Instagram and the reality.
Yes.
No, it was not. So when I started my career or just entering into college, I was always a music lover and a live music lover. So I wanted to work in the music industry, which is obviously very different from what I'm doing now. And when I was kind of shopping around for colleges, I found myself to Hofstra University in Long Island, New York, and they had a music merchandising major. And interestingly enough, when I was doing all the open house tours and I went to Hofstra, it wasn't so much the program and the major that drew me in. It was just like the ambiance and the environment of the college. I remember stepping on foot onto the academic side because we kind of have like a, residential side and academic side. And I was just like, this is home. This is where I want to be. And I actually did not enjoy the presentation for the major. And I was like, okay, I'll figure the major out. But I do remember going to kind of the club info session and learning about Hofstra Concerts, the organization that executed the concerts on campus. And I was like, okay, that. So I know not the major, but I know I'm going to be involved in that. And that really started everything from there. So I ended up majoring in public relations with a minor in sociology. I've always been very interested in people and especially serving people kind of as a customer base. And I felt with public relations, I can find myself anywhere, but I could also go into the live music industry as a PR person, which oddly enough, later on, I was like, I'm happy I did not do that. That's not necessarily where I see myself.
But you took it pretty far because we've talked about this. I mean, You took it to Lincoln Center. Like, talk about how did that happen?
Yeah, sure. So luckily within my public relations major, we had to do an internship generally the summer before senior year. And one of our professors had a connection to Lincoln Center. I grew up in New York City and grew up on the Upper West Side, so very familiar with Lincoln Center. And my dad actually works in the same area. And I was like, perfect, an internship. I can drive in with my dad and all of these great things. He had a parking spot, even better. Just all of those things that kind of like work out. So
the parking spot, right? It's all coming together with the parking spot. The most important thing.
Exactly. So I made my way there and I did really love it. And I ended up actually working full time after I graduated college there as well. And that really was because of who I was as an employee. And that's a message that I share with my students all the time. It wasn't necessarily about being the best public relations person, but I was dedicated. I took pride in everything that I did. And I brought that to the team. And when the opportunity came for them to hire somebody, they called me directly and said, we want you. So they were not even hiring anybody else, no interviews. We know who you are. We value what you brought to the team and we want you for this position.
I want to talk more about that. I want to talk more about that, but you skipped ahead because Lincoln Center, I think, is a dream for so many students who are passionate about music, especially music communications, like what you're talking about. How did you get your foot in the door?
So my professor, when it was time to do internship placements, I had a professor who had a connection there. I spoke to them about my love for live music, and they were able to kind of bring the two together. And I thought it was really great to work at jazz at Lincoln Center because if you're not really familiar with Lincoln Center as a whole, they almost kind of look at it as like a college. They have a big college of and then like small, like your arts and sciences, like your divisions that you would have in a college within Lincoln Center. So they have the opera, they have the ballet, they have Juilliard at the school, and they have jazz at Lincoln Center. And now that I think about it, jazz at Lincoln Center, it wasn't necessarily like the stepchild of the college, but they were like separated from a lot of everything else, and also being jazz and being kind of cool and being a little bit, the improvisation of jazz and all of that. I connected with that as well and really enjoyed the environment. I didn't know jazz at all. I don't think I knew it at all. I think I luckily took a history of music class, and jazz was like a section.
Some people would stop right there and say, I'm not super passionate about jazz. I don't have this jazz background, so maybe this isn't for me. How did you know, like, I'm going to go ahead with this? And then how did you get this opportunity? Because I think you're skipping over some of these key parts I want to touch on, because I think, when a lot of students are thinking about internships, it's the same way we think about jobs and our job search, which is, I've got to be the exact best fit. And there's got to be this opening on a website that I apply to on that day. And I don't really hear that story ever.
No, I mean, it was really just a professor who had a connection about the opening, knowing that I love live music and being able to vouch for me, to be able to say this is somebody who'd be a great person for the
sponsorship.
Role.
Sponsorship.
Well, the sponsorship is huge. Yeah. Who's talking about you when you're not in the room, and not just talking about how good you are, but saying, here's an opportunity. This person should be part of this opportunity.
Yeah. And so, okay, you didn't have this jazz background, but you were maximizing your student experience. You were very involved. We know that you were this go-getter. So what were you telling, this organizers?
Yeah, it's funny to even try to think that far back. It feels like a whole different lifetime ago. But really, in the way that I do anything is just going into it with a full heart and full excitement. And I think I would encourage anybody, what you're good at, what you're excited about. And I think you can find that anywhere. So when I was, introduced into the role, of course, there was press releases and writing and things along that. It was mostly working with the full-time staff to, they would encourage me, here, why don't you start a press release and then we'll work together to see where we can tweak it. A lot of cold calling, which was really difficult, a lot of cold emailing to different publications, which was hard. But one of my main responsibilities were the press clippings. So anytime Jazz at Lincoln Center or any of our artists were introduced, in a magazine or a website, we had press clippings. And I always remember the first day opening
I've been there for press clippings. I interned for a publishing house, and I was in charge of finding and cutting out. This was like, guys, things were printed back then. Like, we had to cut out these little clips of something being mentioned, like an author being mentioned, and save it in this messy folder.
Yes. So I opened like the cabinet drawers, and it was just like, oh my gosh, things were just exploding at it everywhere. You can tell that anything that was maybe taped or stapled onto a piece of paper had come out and was all crinkled. And I was like, oh no, this is not how I operate. I'm a very organized, clean lines. Like, I'm really bad at design because I just want everything to have clean lines. I'm not very abstract in that way. So I was like, well, we have a color copier, so I can paste these things onto a piece of paper and then just make a color copy of it. And now it's just a plain, clean piece of paper that isn't going to become undone in this messy file folder. So, and that's all another important task or important piece of advice I share with students is really just taking pride in anything that you do. It doesn't, a press clipping, to some people is very small. At the same time, all of those press clippings go into a packet that goes to the board of trustees of the organization. And these are big people, big donors, the bosses of the boss. So you want to be put across in the best way possible. And even though that person may not know who you are and that you did it, I would hope that they saw a little bit of a difference when I started to do the press clippings, and whether they realize it or not, I think it does. That kind of perfection and that attention to detail always makes a difference.
I love this story because you, probably not even realizing it, were creating a system that still continues on to this day, I'm sure, or was evolved their system forward. That's a big deal. right? Like after you left, they're like, hey guys, hey, new intern, this is the new system. And you were probably around to see that happen since they hired you, because they're like, we need
I was
Veronica.
like, here's the system. This is what you do. And I tend to, as you say that, I tend to do that a lot in my life. And I don't really know where that skill comes from. And I can't really, put that into words, but I tend to not be shy to start things or to see something that needs to be changed and make the change and be part of the change and create that kind of, sustainable infrastructure that carries along with the organization, even beyond my time. And I would hope that everybody would get to that point in any job that they do. Your goal is that you're going to leave your legacy in some way, even if they don't remember your name. That's something that you changed, made a difference on the people it serves and on the institution as a whole, even far after you're gone.
Yeah, going in with that mindset and sharing those examples. I mean, talk about the ultimate transferable skill, to talk about how you made an impact that had lasting change where you were before and how you can do that for them. It shows you're a problem solver, it shows you're creative, and it shows that you're not afraid to take initiative.
Yeah. And I think any company and any boss looks for that. And I think about, like you said, I'm not a jazz person. So I went into this position both as an intern and then as the kind of the administrative assistant. Not really knowing jazz, but I brought what I know and what I love to it. So it was time to start up a YouTube channel and get on social media. And that was something as a young person I was getting into and I was able to get started. So I was part of starting the Jazz at Lincoln Center YouTube channel. And then, I started to work on a program connecting with college students and college programs, because as we know, jazz tends to be for kind of older people, even though it's not. But, the idea of kind of graying out and that, fans of jazz would no longer be with us and we have to create new fans. So although I wasn't able to kind of follow it through because, ultimately life led to other things, creating a college program to connect with college, students or jazz classes or whatever it was, to bring them to the spaces, get them to meet one-on-one with the musicians and get them that inside to kind of create that connection and then potentially form new fans.
Yeah, it sounds like this experience, like you eked the most out of it. You maximized it to its core. Like it could have been something where you're like, okay, I'm just getting through this internship. I'm getting the experience I need. But by proving yourself, they're handing you more responsibility. And then you have these great stories to tell that you probably couldn't even have expected that you would be able to tell. And I love the YouTube channel example, because in my book, I say, like, you have to offer. If you think you have nothing to offer, I promise you, the one thing you have to offer is what your employers fear most, which is social media, because you actually get it more than them. You just do. That's just the reality.
And really anything too. We all bring our own experiences, lived experiences, passion, skills to wherever we go. And very much so, I think sometimes we shy away from going forward with it because imposter syndrome, it's not going to work, they're not going to accept it, but you never know. And that's something that I always, especially with our student employees, I'm like, if you see something that should be done better, like tell us and take the lead on it. Like I want to empower you to make that change, because the reason it's like this is because none of us have that insider skill to change it. So if you do, let's do it.
Yeah. So as the Assistant Dean of Student Life and Leadership, how has following your passion for helping students impacted your life?
Oh my gosh. Well, first off, I feel like I have thousands of children. I always joke that I'm not interested in having kids because I have thousands of kids that I care about and keep me up at night wondering how they're doing and how I can help them. But really, it's been able to see that change. And I think about what led me to going into student affairs. And it's something that if you talk to really a lot of student affairs people, just kind of happens. You're involved in school and you see these people in these roles, but you don't even fathom that it's a career until you're in that career. But really being able to provide that person. And I think about myself, I'm a first generation college student. My parents didn't go to college and they're very supportive. And I know a lot of people don't always have that support. So that's first and foremost. But oftentimes I didn't really know what I was doing, couldn't really help research something or write a paper or works cited or things like that, or navigate financial aid or registration. So I knew that I wanted to be able to provide that to people, and especially understanding that the more involved in something, connected to something at home and in a place, especially at college, the more successful you're going to be in the long run. So it's although it's impacted me by impacting other people, I think that that's kind of the joy that I've gotten out of it, to be able to even earlier this week, one of our student leaders who is now a part-time employee with the college, they're getting their master's or their bachelor's and master's and going to work in higher education. So their leadership has encouraged them to now, be the next generation of who we are. She's also on the board of trustees and as an alumni student rep. So we had a presentation from our college to other community college trustees about our diversity, equity, inclusion work. And as part of her presentation, she talked about meeting me and the impact I had in kind of making her feel like she belonged, because she's an adult student, mom of 4 boys, came back to school and didn't feel like she was going to be successful, or that she felt, she could be here because everybody else was younger, so on and so forth. She'd been out of school for so long, and that I was be able to provide that environment of that she belonged here and that she could make a difference. And that's all I need because I talk about it all the time. I'm like, if you think about like anything that you felt successful at, I'm like, even, a video game that you like started and you finished. The reason that like you started and you finished it was because you put your all into it. You read websites about it. You got to talk to other people about it. You connected and made friends. You felt like you were, it wasn't the reason we're successful at things is because we really feel part of it and we put our all into it. And that's why, in order to be successful at college, I feel it's the same way. You want to feel like you're at home, that you made a difference, that you're listening, that you're being served. And if I can have a role in that, then I know that I can help change the trajectory of all of our students.
The next thing I wanted to ask you was about feeling qualified. And I feel like this is the perfect time to bring this up, because it sounds like you work with students who aren't feeling qualified, just like this example. She felt like she wasn't the right fit because she was an older student. So what does qualified mean to you?
I never feel qualified, really. And it's really interesting, the more we kind of look at, especially recently looking at race and gender and the social constructs of like who we are and who we should be and how we're expected to operate and how the world sees us. Really, I feel like qualified is almost in itself like one of those social constructs of expectations of how other people see us. So I try very hard to push those thoughts out of my head and really just focus on being qualified as really just being passionate and putting my heart into it. So, you think about a job listing, put the qualifications at the bottom and you're like, oh, I don't have the 3 years experience, or, I only have 2 or all the time. And I think we might have mentioned this at some point too when we chatted, is that work that you do in undergrad, and oftentimes that's not thought about as years experience. But I always tell my students, like, your club leadership, you are managing like a staff, a budget, you're planning, your project management, like that is years of experience. So, where you don't think you have that, you do. But the problem is sometimes on the flip end, people don't see that as years experience. So I think in time, especially with newer generations coming up, we can kind of break down what is qualified. But ultimately, qualified is just being caring and being passionate and, wanting to make a difference in either your company, the field, the people it serves, just wanting to do it, I believe is being qualified. But all the time, I don't feel qualified. And I think many of us are the same way. So it's just a matter of telling yourself, like, if you care, and if you care enough to say, oh, I don't feel qualified, you're probably qualified. So that's just, getting over that hump is the hard part.
So being aware that if you are having those thoughts, you are qualified.
Yeah, all the time I'm like, I'm not doing enough, I'm not doing good enough. And then I have to tell myself, just like the people who are not having those thoughts probably are actually the ones not doing enough. But like the fact that I'm actually thinking that way tells me that I'm already probably like, arms and lengths above everybody else anyway, who may be doubting themselves. So just constantly, don't let the motivation drop. And it's very hard at times, especially this past year and a half. But just keep it going. I think anybody who cares enough about what they're doing is already qualified.
How do you stay motivated?
Sheesh, I don't even know sometimes. I like to just make a difference. So I stay motivated by wanting to produce excellence as best as I can, and make change. So, there are definitely times, even recently, and I think it was definitely Mercury in retrograde, I just felt like I didn't want to do anything. Like it was a struggle to, even get through my to-do list because nothing just
It
felt
could have also
right.
been, the massive pandemic that we just.
And I was talking to my wife and she was like, have you started like taking a new medication that's like throwing you off? And I was like, well, it's a massive pandemic. I work in a field of education, which are like in itself, the education field having to pivot and think about so many things. I mean, just in this past pandemic, we had to celebrate 3 kind of graduating classes in ways that we've never celebrated graduation or commencement before, and having to rethink ways to be celebratory, and recognize the achievement, but be safe in itself was a massive undertaking. So I'm like, pandemic, a year of just like trying new things and not really sure if you're doing it the right way. I'm in my doctorate program. My mom got diagnosed with cancer earlier this year. I'm like, I would understand if I kind of feel off. But I think a lot of times it's just that constant conversation with yourself of, if you feel off, it's temporary, you'll get through it. Just keep pushing. If you got to fake it as much as you can, you fake it, you show up to that meeting with a smile. Yeah, you deal with it later. But yeah, I think ultimately what keeps me motivated is just continuing to make a difference on the world, and knowing that there's so much that we want to do to change, but we're just one person. So if you can really channel that and do what you can to make the change in your little world, that ripple effect will happen.
Yeah. Okay. So, I sent you a copy of the book, but I feel like, you could have, co-written it with me. Just like I talk about the ripple effect. I think we just share a lot of common beliefs here. And that's what drives me too, is the impact. And I love how you talk about, knowing that emotion or that feeling is temporary, feeling unmotivated or an emotion. And someone once told me, like, you need to move through the emotion, like go take a walk, like, and take the actions to get through the emotions, where I think some people can be paralyzed by an emotion.
Yeah. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes. I know, especially with mental health, like the brain is a really powerful muscle that even though better, it will constantly tell you differently. So, I'm thankful enough at this point in my life. I've definitely gone through ups and downs, but I'm thankful enough at this point in my life to be able, even if my brain is saying one thing, that the back of my brain is like, okay, don't worry. Like, yes, you'll get through that. It sucks. But we also have to recognize that our brain is really powerful and has a huge control over us. So, it's hard in the moment, but, and I always think about, I'm like, especially when I'm going through really hard times, or let's say I feel like I really suck at work, or I mess something up big, or I'm just not doing the best. I'm like, in 3 months, I will barely even remember what happened here. And it happens every year when it's time to write like an annual report. And I'm like, I know I felt really bad at some point this year, and I thought I sucked, but I can't even remember what happened. So I try to, when I'm going through that, I try to remind myself too. I'm like, in 3 months, you won't even remember this.
I like that, taking that step back and looking at the bigger perspective. Like, is this a really big deal as I'm making it out to be in the grander scheme of things?
Yeah.
So
Most
tell me
often
about,
it's not.
and yeah, it's probably not. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. And enjoy that answer. Tell me about the object you brought and how it reflects your passion.
Yes. So we got Mickey, and we have a rainbow Mickey, of course. So I am, married to a woman, part of the LGBTQ community, love Disney World, and a lot of things about this. So in the October prior to the pandemic, we had a student conference in Orlando for our Student Government Association, which I advise, and I was able to bring students down, and I was so excited to like show my students one of my favorite places in the world. And one of our SGA president bought this for me as a gift. So there's a lot encompassing in here, just kind of that memory of being down there with them, the student development and leadership that happened, the connections they made, the inspiration they had, going to Disney with them, getting this gift. And then of course, always, being proud of the community that I'm part of, and also supporting our LGBTQ students as best as I can as well, which is fun to do institutionally, and work on policy change, and really work on those underlying things that will make this a place of belonging. And then also just Disney World. I mean, I'm a big nerd. I love it. And everyone's always like, are you going to find another place to go? But I'm like, but why? And then I think about Disney World in itself. I mean, there's always things that companies can do better. But in terms of customer service, Disney is top notch in attention to detail and thematic and creating that customer experience that really puts the customer first. And that's what I like to bring into the work that I do. I always tell my staff, I'm like, think about how you would like to be served and spoken to and engaged, and you exude that onto the students. So, and think about too, like, when issues come up and you're like, is it really that big of a deal? Like, is there something, should we really like be enforcing this policy that much? Like, just different things that come up. So I think about Disney, the way it operates, the way it's continuously innovative. Even now they've added inclusion onto their kind of main keys of how they do. They're changing a lot of their rides that are not culturally aware or respectful. They're always adding new things and always just really thinking about the customer experience. So lots of different things with my Rainbow Pride Mickey here. So that's kind of, I think about my passion, obviously Disney World, I love it, but also just the ideals of what the company lives for, and then getting this from a student leader of mine while we were at a conference together.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, tell me a little bit about why it's important for students to get involved in these leadership roles and to seek them.
Really being able to create that that skill set early on is really important. And we don't, as we know now, job applications will ask for years of experience. And you're like, I just graduated. How do I need the experience? How do I have the experience before I get the experience?
And people are singing that tune, I think, forever. Like that tune never goes away. You're going to always be singing that tune. So you have to realize how to look back at your experience and how it's transferable.
Yeah. So yeah, being able to create those skills early on, learning how to run and manage people and create a shared vision and a goal and an action plan and managing a budget and timelines and everything that's incorporated in that we don't learn necessarily in the classroom the same way. And I always think about being an undergrad and obviously having public relations as my major, but as a student leader running a concerts organization, I felt like what I was learning in that was way more valuable for me in the long run. I was doing contracts and, managing acts that cost, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 and working with William Morris Agency and,
That's
big names that I've
seen. Yeah. That's amazing. For a student to get to know that, like you can get that kind of responsibility even while you're a student, right?
Yeah.
Don't think about being a student as this thing that makes you like any less part of the real world. Exactly. You're in an environment that is still creating these very real experiences. It's almost like this, I would just say more like a bubble version of the real world.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I love about colleges too. I always see it as a little like a town in itself, have like all these moving factors to like this little lived community where people, sometimes live in a sense.
Yeah, you have your student government and they're creating the policies and that's the very real steps that you're taking in that role are going to transfer into the next role that you take after college.
Yeah. And then on top of that, the social aspect. So feeling that you have a purpose and a place beyond, as a student, because obviously as a student, we make a difference, but we're taking in the services, we're learning from the professors and then of course executing that out in papers and all of that. But to be able to feel like you're a part of the change as well, I think is really powerful, and being able to create that social environment for yourself. I mean, I have a text message to this day with a lot of my best friends that I have from that concerts organization. And that's now, it's crazy to think about, probably 15 years ago or so, at everybody's wedding and part of everybody's lives, and everyone's having kids, but it really also allows you to connect with people who are like-minded. So we were all really into music, but joining any kind of club of any sort, you're going to be connected to people who are like-minded, but also different, and that really push you outside of your comfort zone. So I think it's great to create those skills and get that lived experience, but then also to be able to find friends and lifelong friends that really get you through that keep your motivation going when you feel like you can't make it through the semester.
Right. And back to, your brain is tricking you. You want to be able to lean on that support system. And this is how you find that group of like-minded people. And that community is so important. I love that. What career advice do you have for our listeners today? College students that are just trying to figure it out, or even young professionals that are feeling lost in their career?
I'll go back to one of my first statements is really just taking pride in anything that you do. Um,
I wrote that one down. I love that statement.
Yeah, because it's, any report that you're submitting, an email, a phone call, everything that you do makes a difference on how you impact the world and how people see you. Sometimes it's you're going up against kind of social norms that you have to fight against, but just taking that pride in everything that you do, in the way that you do it, and who you are. So also making sure never to really deteriorate from what you believe in, and really holding on to that as well. So taking pride in everything, and then additionally knowing that you are qualified, and it's not whatever the world is telling you, keep pushing through that, because you are the one. I mean, I think about people becoming president and not necessarily having the qualifications of being president, but they do it. And oftentimes I think it's also a female thing. I've read once that men tend to apply for jobs even if they don't meet all the requirements that are on that bottom, and women will tend to shy away from a little bit if they don't meet all of them. So sometimes kind of shifting your thought process to that too, because what you bring to a job is not necessarily always your skills. It's your passion, it's your enthusiasm, it's who you are. And a lot of that stuff can be learned. So if you've never written a budget or managed a budget, but you're excited about the job and the company and what they stand for, you'll figure out how to write a budget and manage a budget. But you can't teach enthusiasm, and you can't teach passion. You can teach the other stuff.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I want to leave everyone with this message from Veronica, which is being passionate and putting your heart into it. You can't teach that. I think that is such a great point, that this is what if you can bring this to any opportunity, that's your differentiator. Wow. Thank you so much, Veronica. I loved hearing your story. I love your advice for our listeners, and you're amazing. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening to our show. Be sure to check out the show notes and email any questions to yourpassioncareer@gmail.com. Bye.